Hi everybody, this is Damien from Legend Life. With our Legend Stories, we look to share inspirational stories of people who have found and are living their purpose, people who are looking to make a difference and positively impact the world. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Alex Egan. Alex is the founder of a number of companies in sustainability, and today he's going to share with us a little bit his insights into his purpose and what he's trying to achieve with his companies. So how are you going today, Alex?
I'm very well, thank you, Damien. All is well.
Very good. So you're based in Wales, is that correct?
We're based in Wales, but the business has a global perspective.
No, awesome. So to get started, maybe you can give us a little bit of your backstory. So, what you were doing as a child growing up, kind of like, did that give you kind of like sense of what you were going to be doing now? We're just trying to find out where it kind of all started.
Absolutely not, really. I grew up in a small valleys town. It's quite depressed, socioeconomically it's depressed. There's a poverty of aspiration, actually, which is the thing that sort of typifies this part of the world. So kind of 40 years ago, the South Wales Valleys was part of a mining community, and that mining community came to a very abrupt end. And it was replaced with exactly nothing. So there was no strategy, there was nothing. So people's sense of self-worth and self-belief was removed, their jobs, their work in the coal mines and so forth. And because it was replaced with nothing at all, that kind of mindset became entrenched. So people in this part of the world, typically quite apologetic, and the poverty of aspiration remains still, 40, 50 years down the track, is still a big problem here. So that was the sort of backdrop for which I grew up. However, my mother is a formidable woman, and I've just kind of watched her talk things into life just with absolute conviction and passion. So that has been the thing that's saved me, I think, from a very different life.
So your mother's role model helped you have a different mindset than perhaps your peers?
100%, yeah, for sure. My mother's a feminist. She was at Greenham Common, so a little bit of a rebel in her day. She's run a 40-piece jazz band and taken a community jazz band all over Europe to various jazz festivals. She's been a formidable creature, and it's been a real pleasure to watch all sorts of different people come through and into the house as I was growing up. It's opened a world of possibility, which many of my peers, I guess, didn't have access to, or may have vicariously through me, perhaps.
Yeah. And your interest in the environment, so how did that kind of develop?
Slowly, I guess. I kind of fell into geology and earth sciences just because I was interested in the natural world, broadly speaking. So I did a degree in environmental geoscience or geology. Between my second and my third year, I took a gap year out of university because I was basically tanking university. I was on the cusp of being thrown out for all sorts of reasons I probably won't go into here.
Yeah.
But the net result of that, I took that year and we did a little bit of traveling and wandered around. I went down to your neck of the woods in New Zealand and Australia and the South Pacific and met a bunch of people, and that kind of broadened horizons a little bit. So thoroughly enjoyed that. But what that did most importantly is allow me to go back into university and finish my degree.
Yeah.
So interestingly, because the industry I'm in is geoscience or consultancy, the barriers for entry into that are typically master's degree and above.
Yeah.
So as I went through university, I did my 2 years and I took a year out. And then I did my final year as all my peers were doing their master's degree. So by the time I actually graduated, I had a network of people embedded in all the consultancy businesses. So rather than going up the master's hump, I managed to sneak in the back door via some of my existing network.
No, very good. So in this stage, did you kind of like understand what your purpose was, or was that still in kind of like a process of developing?
No, I absolutely didn't have clarity of purpose by that point. I knew I wanted to make a difference. And at that point, I joined a big multidisciplinary PLC business, and like an engineering consultancy business with offices all over the place, really. And I was desperate to make an impact, just to try and make things better.
Yeah.
And I spent a long time in that business, and we did some really interesting things with some wonderful people. But ultimately, I always kind of felt a little bit suppressed, because you're always being weighed and measured by somebody else's yardstick, or indeed somebody else's lack of imagination.
Yeah. So, and then that obviously led to the impetus to you kind of like setting off on your own. So how long ago did you set off?
Oh, there was another little step in between. So I found myself in a bar in central London after an award ceremony, wagging my finger at the UK MD and the Northern Ireland MD because of a particular project which I felt could have gone a lot better.
Yeah.
And it was getting close to midnight, and I kind of realized really clearly, mid-wag by the bar, that I cared about this a lot more than they did. That I really wanted to be part of a business that was proud of what they were doing, was proud of the output. And what I realized is I cared a lot more, and I kind of resolved to leave the next day. And I actually joined a niche, high-end consultancy business, privately owned, with about 60 staff.
Yeah.
Just with a view to looking the shareholders in the eye and shaping that direction of travel and being just proud of what we were outputting, the quality of work that we were outputting. So that was a little sort of segue in between starting my own business.
Okay. So at this point, have you defined what you think is your purpose? So in this segue, you kind of like worked out, I want to make a difference. I'm going to leave this company because it's not kind of giving me that opportunity. Here I have an opportunity to have a little bit more impact. Did you kind of like define it at that moment? And then that led to the business, or what was the journey?
The journey was realizing that I jumped ship from a big PLC to be able to direct where we were going.
Yeah.
So I could make representations directly to the shareholders of that business. And I realized towards the end of that journey that what they were trying to do is sell that business back to a PLC again.
Okay.
So I was kind of sweating spinal fluids to drive life into this new facet to the business. And then I kind of realized that actually all that endeavor would be squandered because I would be absorbed back into the PLC again.
Yeah.
And I'd left that for very, very clear reasons. And I did not want to go back. So that was, in essence, the impetus to start our own business. But also, what that did is allow us to set the culture. So I started, the starting premise was, who are the best people I've ever worked with in this industry, full stop. And then how do I get these guys on board and we can start a business with that little nucleus.
And so you basically went out, kind of recruited peers you'd been working with, and then painted a vision. So at this point, you must have had a kind of like an idea on what the purpose was, because you're going to have to sell this to a bunch of other people who are going to have to leave very successful careers to come on board on something completely new.
Yeah, and I didn't cook this up in isolation. There was three of us who started the business, one of whom's in Canada.
Yeah.
So there's this sort of international dimension to how we were thinking about this from the get-go. And actually, when we started, the objective was to be disruptive in the environmental consultancy space, which is quite a niche industry, actually. It's an applied science consultancy.
Yeah.
So as I perceived it at the time, it was full of businesses named after the owner and or with three-letter acronyms. So I wanted to be subversive and a little bit disruptive in that space. So I wanted to compete with PLC, big businesses operating nationally and internationally, but not on price,
yeah,
or on quality and service level.
And you're being successful at this?
And when we sketched out our original business plan, and I've still got it scratched in a notebook here, and I'll happily share that with people. I set aside some really, what I thought to be extraordinarily ambitious goals, as a sort of 3-year timeline. And by the time we reached and breached our 3rd birthday, we'd smashed those out of the park, and we're growing in ways I couldn't have possibly imagined right now.
Yeah, no, brilliant. But we still have to kind of answer the question of, what is your purpose? So what do you feel is your purpose?
Right now, we're using the business to weigh in on climate change. So we're trying to disrupt some of the barriers acting against climate change resilience and adaptation. So we're pointing the business squarely. We're trying to make a difference through and with our business in that space.
Okay. So you've got two related companies as well. So all of them under the Yellow Sub kind of banner?
We've got 3 real companies right now and another couple cooking up.
Yeah.
But philosophically, all of these businesses exist for the same reason. So we've got Yellow Sub Geo, which is our applied science consultancy business. We've got a creative business, so called Yellow Sub Creative.
Yeah.
And really the genesis of that is because scientists and engineers are notoriously crap at communicating with anybody who isn't a scientist or an engineer.
Yeah.
So we created a creative agency business to help us communicate with digital technologies, games, apps, VR, machine learning, code, a whole bunch of other things in a much, much more sophisticated way.
Okay. And the third business?
Third business is called Newable, and that's majoring on heat and energy. So it's the race towards net zero, low carbon futures. And we're trying to disrupt some of the barriers acting against the adoption of renewable technologies in housing and new buildings, and also retrofit as well.
Okay.
So that's a community interest company, by the way.
No, very good. So as we were talking before we started the interview, you've recently been certified B Corporation. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and, you know, the process and then why you actually did it.
B Corp, quite simply, is the future of business. It needs to be the future of business. So what B Corporation is, it stands for Benefit Corporation. And it kind of envisages a future where business has a purpose, as if people and place mattered. So the accreditation process is serious and it requires a sort of fairly fundamental rethink of what your business is and does. But we started Yellow Sub Geo with this ethos. So our ethos preceded the knowledge of B Corp, and then we found B Corp as something which mirrored and echoed our mission, if you like.
Yep.
What it does is it requires you to amend your articles of association for a business to give equitable weight to people and planet over profit. So if you're making a boatload of money, but not making a difference environmentally or socially, then it doesn't quite work. You know, what's the point in your business if it's just a machine to make money?
Yeah. So fundamentally, your business is kind of like aligned with these kind of like 3 elements. So the people, planet, and then profit. So
yeah, you know, if profit will come as a consequence of you doing everything else right. So if we're having a lot of fun, we're enjoying the journey of work, which is part of the reason we set the business up. We're attracting all manner of extraordinary people who are philosophically aligned for the same reasons, sort of self-motivated, free-thinking, creative people. Which means we're weighing in and making a big difference environmentally and socially. And then the profit's just a byproduct of that.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's change tact a little bit. So let's talk about the journey you personally went through. So you kind of, because a lot of people are going to be in a similar situation. They're going to be working for a big company, a little bit disenchanted. They obviously have aspirations and what they would like to do. They would like to have a positive impact, but a lot are kind of like held back from making a jump or that leap of faith to go and starting themselves over. So, you know, did you face any of these challenges and how did you address them? Like, you know, you've reached a certain age. Now I'm going to have to jump ship, start all over again. Like we talked earlier, you've got 2 young kids. So, you know, how difficult was it for you, or was it an easy kind of transition?
It's never an easy leap. I think a lot of people look up at that metaphorical cliff and say, yes, I'd love to make the jump. And I think a few people will climb up and take a view from there, and then they'll get jelly Elvis legs on top and think, oh shit, that's a long way down, right? But that jump has been so rewarding, you know, it really has. And I think a big part of it is surrounding yourself with other people who are philosophically aligned. You end up, it kind of feels like you need to do it alone, actually, but you're never really alone.
So the secret, what I'm getting from you is that, you know, seek out other people who may have done it before, or people who are kind of like aligned in your thinking process. Maybe you want to collaborate with someone, but you don't have to make the decision to do it by yourself.
I think you've got to want it, and you've got to be prepared to take risks and follow through with that. So that conviction element's really important. Yes, it's a tricky thing, and it's not for everybody.
Yep.
But I will say that it's far more possible than people think.
Yep, because people are creating in their mindset, aren't they? They've kind of like limited themselves to what they can possibly do. So what, from, you know, you've probably encountered it. You're obviously a person who's prepared to take risks and, you know, jump, you know, when your convictions are kind of like strong enough. But what would you say to anyone who's kind of like facing those internal kind of like battles? You know, what's the process you could possibly go to kind of like get through that?
Okay, so I kind of started, the way I thought about this was like, what is the worst case scenario here? Let's start with that as a start for 10. So if the worst case scenario is that I roll these dice and it fails, then I've got a whole bunch of people that I know. I've got a bunch of experience and some qualifications. The absolute disaster scenario would be me going back tail between my legs back to PLC and getting another job for somebody else again. And honestly, that would have been an absolute disaster. And I still would regard that as a disaster. But on the scale of things, you know, so what? I just have to suck it up and learn from things, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, if that's the worst that can happen, and actually the best that could happen is that this could be a success and we could do a whole bunch of interesting things and actually enjoy the journey of work over the next however long. I'm not putting a backstop on that. Then that, it didn't feel like a risk at all, actually. It just felt like something that I really needed to do.
So basically, you just got to work through the process and kind of like identify how big a risk really it is. And then what's the upside on the other end if it all kind of like pans out.
Yeah, it's just having a bit of strategy, isn't it? It's what is the outcome you want? And that actually might not be, you know, a financial metric. So that might not be, I need to have X number of staff or be turning over X number of, you know, pounds or dollars or whatever.
Yeah.
That might be, how do I want to feel this week, next month, next year, in 3 years' time? How do I want to enjoy the journey of what I'm doing every day? And is that going to, you know, if you've spent any time working for a big company, you already know how that feels.
Yeah.
But you can become kind of institutionalized in that. So that's kind of safe. However uncomfortable and frustrating that is, it's comfort zone, right? What you've actually got is 10, 20, 30 years of empirical evidence, which suggests that you can survive that. But if what you want to do is more than just survive, if you want to live and thrive, then you need to roll the dice and step up and put yourself in harm's way, be vulnerable, ask for help. My single bit of advice to anybody, ask for help. The subtext is so powerful. It's such a huge compliment to other people, and people want to help. They want you to win.
No, very good. So I also believe you're a big advocate of what you call the yes mindset. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because that's part of it, part of this journey, isn't it? Like to make that jump, you kind of have to have that kind of a mindset.
Yeah, there's always like a couple of individuals, you know, you spend a little time hanging out with people and you just get kind of swept along with their energy, their sort of propensity to say yes to things. Their instinct is to say yes.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that is that it leads you in all sorts of weird and wonderful places. So there's a couple of people in my life who I've kind of observed saying yes to stuff and watched the consequences of that. And it's been hugely empowering.
So basically you now, when presented with an opportunity, you know, you'll basically say yes, you know, even though normally you would say no, or how does it all work?
And it sounds reckless. It's not reckless at all. It's deeply strategic. So the instinct is like, if this sounds like a good idea, my mind will immediately go to how can I possibly make this happen? Who do I need to knock? Whose doors do I need to knock on? What pieces do I need to move around the chessboard? But then you need to take a deep breath and think about all the things that could stop that, or all the reasons why that's a bad idea. So you need to have this sort of dissonance, cognitive dissonance, think about things in a very different way. How do I break this idea?
Yep.
And
no, it's brilliant, because it's kind of like the positivity versus negative kind of like thing that goes on. So like most people, natural default is negative. So rather than focusing on what the possibilities are, and if this is really an opportunity, to immediately start like putting and digging holes into it. No, that's not going to work. Instead of like going, taking a different perspective and going, why could this work? What's the possibilities here? Is this really an opportunity? And then obviously, as you said, you got to rationalize it. You can't just be, oh, everything's positive, it's going to all work and all of this. No, you got to get step back and then you look at it. But the first thing you do, it seems, is positively, yes, this is possibly a great opportunity. I'm going to have to really look at this later on, but look, this is why it possibly could work. Okay, that's great. Now I'm going to like rationalize, make sure it is something that I can actually invest my energy and it's going to be worthwhile. So it's a completely different perspective than most people would have.
What do you think? I mean, if you just start with what if, it's so powerful. What if this could work? What if it did work?
Yeah. No, I think it's different. Like, well, the reason 100 people are not doing exactly the same as you, like in different kind of fields, is because they've gone, why is it not going to work? It's like they focus on the negative, they're not focusing on why it could possibly work.
I think, and I've been in this circumstance working for other people, is it's a bandwidth issue. Because you spend so much of your time and your energy in work just trying to be adequate, this sort of feeling of guilt and inadequacy is almost programmed into that workplace.
Yeah.
And then consequently, to kind of give yourself permission to think about what if is a luxury sometimes, particularly if you've got kids and other chaos to deal with, right? There's not a lot of space in that equation to ponder what if. So I think, giving yourself permission and being kind enough to yourself to entertain these types of thoughts about what if I did this, would my life be better or different? Would I enjoy it more? Would it be more purposeful? And it doesn't have to be about big impact. It's not about changing the world necessarily. How do you want to feel? How do you want to interact with people?
Yeah. So you got to kind of look back to yourself and then find out what you really want. So that's where I guess we go back to the question, finding your purpose and or what makes you really excited about life. It's pretty important to have that time or give yourself permission to kind of like, see if that's a possibility or something you should follow. Would you agree?
I think introspection is really difficult, and it boils down to self-love. And culturally, that's not something we are very good at, I don't think, because it's often misread as being selfish. But actually, if you're not able to understand what it is that makes you tick, and in order to do that, you need to ask yourself some serious questions. And again, I think that's a difficult journey, and it's not something that, actually, I think it's something that people actively avoid, by being busy. I can't possibly think about that because I've got this to do and this to do, and I simply don't have time. I think that's ducking the issue because it's difficult.
Yeah. No, very true. So you're definitely a big advocate for time to self-reflect or introspect, as you said, to kind of like really understand who you are, because that's the only way you're kind of like going to work out, what's next. Because if you're caught up in the PLC, like the big company all the time, you're not really living your life. You're not actually being authentic, are you? You're kind of like just trying to tailor yourself to fit into the box they kind of like require you to fit into.
Yeah, so what a waste of human endeavor, really. We're squeezing people into increasingly narrow boxes, and then weighing and measuring their ability or their usefulness as a human against this sort of set of KPIs in a really dry, boring way. And whatever you did last year, the business always wants, a little bit more the next year and the year after, and so it goes.
Yeah.
It's dehumanizing, I think. Sorry to be a bit binary about it.
No, definitely. So what's your definition of success?
It's a direction of travel. This is a continuum. We don't have like a fixed end point here. We really want to make an impact through and with our business. I want to spend time with amazing people doing really interesting and impactful things. And we are doing that every single day. I'm absolutely loving life at the moment.
So do you have you ever on your kind of like journey kind of like felt kind of like demotivated And then how do you deal with that? You know, you come across kind of like, it appears insurmountable obstacles, challenges, and then how do you work through it? Like, obviously you have worked through them, but maybe you've had or hit some roadblocks along the way. So how do you personally deal with them?
I don't think I've ever felt demotivated by this. And I think part of that is just because of the team and the culture that we've created here. I think that the big challenge actually is really bringing the business to bear on big challenges. You know, when we started the business, I don't know if you're familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes.
So there's a range of goals, and we orientated the business towards the UN's SDGs. And that speaks to environmental and social justice. And I think where we've cycled through now is that what we actually do is we develop products and engagement, and everything we do is geared towards climate change. And I think we've been a little bit cowed by the scale of that challenge to date. So just to kind of verbalize it to you today is a little bit of a step in the right direction. But when I reflect on what we've been doing for the last 5 years, it's explicitly that. You know, we've created Newable, which is about net zero. We're creating a huge hydro project, which is going to weigh in on water resources, which is kind of the sharp pointy end of where climate change will impact.
No, awesome. So obviously then you're very big on goal setting like objectives, like stretch goals. So, and then what's your process around, setting these kinds of goals?
Not to be too rigid about it, and not to spend a really long time thinking about a fixed endpoint. I think in terms of success, you asked me a little earlier, and I didn't fully answer the question. I think what we would like to do is demonstrate to the business community that making a profit is not mutually exclusive to making a difference environmentally and socially. So what we would like to do is grow a serious business and maybe take it through to IPO if necessary, which manifestly makes a difference. So if you're doing something which manifestly makes a difference, if you can do it at scale, then what you're doing is scaling that benefit. And I think that's the thing that we would like to achieve as a sort of middle distance goal.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Well, that raises an interesting point, doesn't it? Because I think a limitation a lot of people have that, as you said, making a difference or doing some good is exclusive or mutually exclusive to making money. So a lot of people say making money is bad, where actually it's a facilitator, isn't it? So they should be more open to the possibility of doing something. And it doesn't matter if you're making money out of it. It actually enables you to have greater impact.
100%. I think capitalism can be reimagined. And I think that's what we would like to do. One of our metrics for success is to demonstrate that. And it can be used as a hammer to smash things. And we've got the last couple of 100 years of evidence to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But it can equally use that same hammer can be used to build stuff, right? So we can use it in much more sophisticated ways and use the power of capital markets to scale beneficial things.
Yeah.
So if we can do something which manifestly makes a difference and we can attract investment, we can do it on a global scale. So that's where we want to get to. That's next steps.
Okay. No, brilliant. So what's the legacy you're looking to leave behind?
We're really deliberately making steps towards employee ownership in our business. So I'm trying to make myself displaceable and actually give some real skin in the game to the people who have climbed aboard our Yellow Sub. So the legacy really is just to pass the baton. And again, I've hard baked into the articles of association what the business is and does.
Yeah.
So what I really want to do is empower and engage other people to take this on and not to be limited by my imagination, right?
Yeah.
It's not about me. We just created a vehicle. Where it goes next is not up to me anymore.
Yeah. No, excellent. So what's the future vision of the world you would like us all to live in?
I think where we're focusing at the moment is on water security. So, I think some notion of a water secure world is probably hollow. as a child's fantasy, perhaps. It's a bit like world peace, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think climate change adaptation and resilience is where we're going to be weighing in. And I think, you know, you can see the patterns emerging at the moment. You know, lots of conflict and wars are going to be fought over water resources in the coming decades.
Yeah.
So collectively, we need to make much better decisions about how we utilize and value and manage a shared resource. And I think in order to do that, we need better decision-making tools and platforms. So that's ostensibly what we're building right now.
Okay. No, it's a interesting perspective, and certainly something we need to kind of address. I think a lot of people forget that climate change has other kind of like other masks or other kind of like things, like water scarcity is one of the impacts that certainly needs to be looked at, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a, you know, climate scientists have objectively failed, you know, to communicate this effectively. We've known about this problem for 50 years plus, right? But we've turned up to the party with facts, figures, stats, graphs. And what you've done is immediately alienated 80-90% of the population who are crap at maths in school.
Yeah.
You know, so what we need to do is invert that whole HOM strategy, and we need to lead with personal stories, drama, narrative, animation, technology, things that actually engage with people at a human level. You know, that you can't really glean from a graph. So yeah, I think it just needs a full rethink.
Yeah, no, definitely. So obviously there's a bunch of people in our age bracket, like in the 40 plus kind of like arena, who are kind of like maybe unfulfilled, disenchanted with where they're at in life, you know, maybe a little bit like where you were. So what advice would you give to these people, you know, about, you know, how they can kind of like change the direction of their lives?
I think it starts with self-love. So be kind to yourself. Take yourself off the hamster wheel of death for a little bit and give yourself some permission to think about how you want your future to be. Yeah, I think you've just got to lean into that and give yourself permission to think.
Okay. So also, I know you're a big advocate of work-life balance, or I believe you call it life-work balance. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a rundown on what your perspective on this is.
It's really interesting, actually. The journey of starting your own business is that you engage with lawyers and HR professionals, and then you have to write contracts of employment and write a process and a handbook and all sorts of other stuff. And then if you want to do something manifestly different, it requires you to ignore a bunch of things that you've been told by professionals in this space.
Yeah.
And really where we wanted to get to is like, you know, if you're aboard our business, then we already trust you, right? So we're going to hire humans and we're going to trust them to do what it is, to make responsible decisions. So I don't really care where people work, how people work, when people work, completely decentralize that, right? So, you know, if the surf conditions are really pumping this morning, I'd rather you just lean in and went surfing for a couple of hours and work later. Actually, we have abolished timesheets as well. So we're not interested in weighing and measuring people's input. We're just interested in outputs. And in order for that to have efficacy, I need to do it myself. Yeah. So I really deliberately do a lot of meetings when I'm walking about or on my bike, or I take the camper van down to the beach and we rock up there. So this just taking, you know, the sort of the work outside into beautiful places and hanging around with nice people.
Cool. So now that's a good lead into, you know, because obviously you're someone who kind of likes the outdoors, like you're a surfer, you also like biking. So how important do you think it is for people to get outdoors, spend more time, you know, having new experiences and adventures?
I think the links between outdoor. Okay, so the suicide rates are really high in the UK at the moment, and mental health is at the heart of that. And I think it's not really reported very much. You know, if you kind of were to amass all the numbers of people actually dying from violent crime, which includes overseas conflict, I think it's dwarfed by the numbers of people who are committing suicide right now.
Yeah.
And I think that the kind of the lifeline that the outdoors provides, you know, access to our green spaces, our national parks, just getting out into the world is so important. It's more important than ever before now. And it's something which COVID and lockdown has illustrated graphically, is how important these things are.
Okay. And so I think this is a good lead in, because you've got a new adventure on the horizon. So you're about to go on a bit of a cycle journey, quite an extensive one, pedal for parks. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, and then how you personally got involved.
It's amazing what happens when you get out of your own way and you just lean in and say yes to things. Yeah. It's a mentality, you know, you become open to opportunities, and that little subtle shift in mindset, all sorts of opportunities that would normally pass you by, all of a sudden become reality. It's been an extraordinary couple of weeks. So I kind of leaned into this expedition. I found a group on the internet called the Yes Tribe. Yeah, which, you know, as we were speaking about a little earlier, just resonated with me, and I leaned into this, and I've signed up to a couple of coffee mornings and went and made friends, and I kind of felt like I was at home here around like-minded people. And then Issaac, the expedition leader, had posted up a job spec. Effectively, one of their team members had dropped out late stage, and they wanted to backfill. And I kind of read the list, and I think historically I would have read that, and then just imagined that it was beyond me, that it happened to somebody else, you know? Yeah. But because I was in this sort of really deliberate yes mentality, I just kind of responded to Issaac. I rang him and said, look, and I'm really interested in this. And then I sent in the application, and here I am a couple of weeks later. And I was ducking a lot of that because I'm not necessarily very comfortable with a media dimension to it. Yeah. So I was really a little bit stressed about that bit, but then it's not a good enough reason not to do this sort of thing. So the expedition is about valuing green spaces, about national parks. It's about how making an eco-adventure documentary as a vehicle to illustrate innovative solutions to regeneration. And really what we're going to need to do is regenerate our green spaces faster than we're denigrating them. Otherwise, that all-important lifeline to mental health will become thinner and thinner. You know, and it's not something we can afford to do. So it's a super important issue, I think. And, you know, philosophically and commercially, professionally, it's perfectly aligned with everything that we're doing with our business. Yeah,
no, very good. Well, congratulations on being a successful applicant, and sure it'll be quite an exciting journey. So it's like a couple of weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to be a self-propelled journey across land and sea between the Orkney Islands, which is an island off the coast of mainland Scotland, and the Scilly Isles, which is just off the coast of Cornwall. So it's about 1,000 miles of bike packing. But those two stretches of water connecting Scotland to Orkney and Cornwall to the Scilly Isles are pretty serious stretches of water. So it's a place where lots of tides converge, lots of currents. And we're crossing them on water bikes, which I kid you not, we picked up 2 weeks ago. So we're having to learn how to ride those things, how to navigate, and a whole bunch of things.
So, well, sounds very exciting. So it's another example of you trying to get yourself out of your comfort zone. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, there's going to be a bit, I think, when we leave the coast of Cornwall. So I think the horizon when you're at sea is about 11 miles plus minus into the distance. Yeah. So there'll be a point where we won't be able to see land in any direction, just miles out to sea on this little pedalo, effectively.
No, well, I'll be interested to see how the journey goes. And then even getting an update from you on how it all went.
Come and give us a push. I think we're going to need it.
Yeah. So, well, to finish up, I've got a couple of questions left. So what's your definition of living a legendary life? Or what I call your best life?
For me, that is the ability to get out of your own way. So to ignore that little narrative in your own head that stops you from doing all of these things, from leaning in, from seeing the opportunities, from being alive to the opportunities, and then acting on the opportunities. So get out of your own way.
Okay. And then do you have a life motto, something you kind of like live by?
I'm a big fan of Fight Club.
Yeah.
I've got a bumper sticker, a box of bumper stickers. I kind of collect them, actually.
Yeah.
So there's a bit in Fight Club that says, "You're not your job. You're not the contents of your wallet. You're not your fucking car keys." And it sort of speaks to me a little bit, because so often I've spent so much of my life defined by that, you know, sort of trapped in this paradigm of doing things that I didn't really need or want to do.
Yeah. So the life motto is basically live your authentic self, not be defined by things outside of yourself. Yeah,
I think so. I'm scratching around for one of my bumper stickers at the moment, but yes, I've got a variety. The other one I quite like is George Bernard Shaw quote. So it's called The Unreasonable Man, and it says, "The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends upon the unreasonable man."
Yeah. No, very cool. Like, that's a very good statement. As you said, too many of us are kind of like conformists, aren't we? We try to kind of fit into a box. So actually, in order to change in the world is created by those who don't want to be defined by the box that society kind of like tries to force us into. So nice. No, very interesting. So to close out, what are 3 life lessons you've learned in life that you think would be of value to others?
3 life lessons. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I'm old enough to impart wisdom on life lessons yet.
No, you are. All of us have something we've learned along life that other people would get the benefit from.
Ask for help is huge. It changes everything. Get out of your own way, by which I mean ignoring that negative narrative in your brain, which kind of limits your horizons and your opportunities, and just lean in. It's so powerful.
Yep. No, brilliant. No, awesome. See, you did have 3 life lessons after all. So, no, we've all got lessons that we've learned and which other people are going to get some benefit out of. So, you know, and those 3 are very relevant. So I think a lot of people will get value out of that. So, well, thanks again, Alex. It's been wonderful talking to you. I'm sure a lot of people will get some value out of this. So for anyone who's interested, I know you're not big on social media and you're not, you don't like being in the public eye, but how can anyone find out a little bit more about yourself and then even, you know, Yellow Sub Geo?
Pedal for Parks is probably the easiest way to track me down at the moment. So pedalforparks.co.uk, I believe. It's on all the Instagram channels. We've got Instagram socials across the piece there. So that's a good way of linking in and just checking out what we're doing. But other than that, Yellow Sub Geo and Yellow Sub Creative are both got social media outlets as well.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks again. It's been wonderful.
Pleasure. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Damien.